I'm Jenna. In my family's house, there were always two pedestals. One was for my sister Rachel. Hers was golden. Perfect. Already marked for Rachel, the corporate lawyer. The other one was mine. It was always empty. My passion wasn't respectable. It didn't fit in our affluent New England suburb. My passion was the smell of sawdust and walnut, the feel of sandpaper on my hands. I was a woodworker. To my father, Robert, it was dirty, manual labor. To my mother, Susan, it was just a social embarrassment. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? No matter how hard you tried, let me know your story down in the comments. This dynamic was set in stone. I remember being 12 and spending an entire month carving a set of tiny, intricate wooden birds. I was so proud of them. I showed my mom, Susan, and she just smiled that tight smile and said, "Oh, that's nice. Jenna, just make sure you clean up that sawdust." A week later, I saw them in the trash. That same weekend, Rachel won a regional debate tournament. My dad, Robert, cleared a whole section of the living room bookcase for her trophy. He even went out and bought a new shelf just for it. And the worst part, he asked me to help him assemble it. As we got older, the stakes just got higher. When Rachel graduated from law school, she landed a job at a massive firm in the city. They gave her a six-figure signing bonus. A six-figure bonus. My parents threw the most lavish party I'd ever seen. All their friends from the country club were there, patting my dad on the back. "You must be so proud, Robert," they'd say, and he'd beam. His chest puffed out. "That's my girl." A real career. Around the same time, I got my first big commission. It was from a local chef who'd seen one of my pieces. He wanted a set of artisanal cutting boards for his restaurant. It was my first real professional order. I made a few hundred. I was so excited. I went home holding the check and I told my parents. My mom just looked confused. "Cutting boards? Like for vegetables?" My dad didn't even look up from his newspaper. He just scoffed. "A few hundred? Your sister's bonus is more than most people's yearly salary. When are you going to stop playing with splinters and get a real job, Jenna?" I didn't understand it then. I just felt that familiar cold sting of not being good enough. But looking back, I see it perfectly. I realize now our family wasn't a family. It was a system, a narcissistic family system. In that system, Rachel was the golden child. She was the one who did everything right. The one who proved to the world that they were good parents. Her achievements were their achievements. She was their shiny, perfect reflection. And I was the scapegoat. I was the one who was different. The one who didn't fit their mold. I was the place they poured all their disappointment. All their frustration. All their fears about their own status. It didn't matter what I did or how hard I worked. My role was to be the problem. It was never about me or about Rachel. It was about them. It was about their egos. I spent my whole life trying to win a game that was rigged from the start. I just hadn't realized that the only way to win was to stop playing. But that lesson wouldn't come until later. First came the humiliation. The breaking point came on my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. I decided I was going to do it. I was going to make something so big, so beautiful, so undeniable that they would finally have to see me. They would finally have to admit that my hobby was a real talent. I spent weeks, months working in my small garage workshop. I poured every bit of skill, every bit of hope I had into it. It was a 12-person dining table made from a single slab of solid black walnut with hand-carved joinery. It was without a doubt a masterpiece. I arranged to have it delivered the day of their big anniversary party. I arrived early, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. I imagined my mother's gasp, my father's stunned silence, maybe even pride. The delivery truck arrived. The table was brought in and placed in the center of their grand dining room. It was perfect. The guests started to arrive. All their country club friends, everyone dressed in expensive clothes. I just stood near the table waiting. My father, Robert, walked into the room, a glass of champagne in his hand, laughing with a guest. He stopped. He stared at the table. The room went quiet. This was it. He looked at my mother. Then at me. His face wasn't proud. It was they squished it. "What is this?" he said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I swallowed. It's for your anniversary. I made it. He let out a short, sharp laugh. A laugh of pure derision. You made it, Jenna. I ordered catering for this party, not a high school shop project. He turned to my mother. Susan, why is this thing in our dining room? Before I could speak, he waved over two of the catering staff. You two, he barked, pointing at the table. Get this thing out of here. Haul it to the curb. The trash collectors can deal with it. The room was silent. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Haul it to the curb. He then looked right at me, his eyes cold. I have spent 20 years trying to save you from this embarrassment. We gave you every chance to be respectable like your sister. If you want to be a blue-collar laborer, fine, but no daughter of mine will be one. He gestured to the door. Get out. You're no longer welcome here. I looked at my mother. She just stared at her champagne glass, refusing to meet my eyes. Rachel, my sister, looked pale, but she said nothing. I walked out. I didn't cry. Not yet. I got to my car, parked down the street, and I sat there shaking. I just stared at the house, and then I saw it. The two caterers, struggling, hauled my masterpiece out the front door and dragged it down the driveway. They left it on the curb next to the recycling bins. All that work, all that hope sitting on the curb for the trash. The tears finally came hot and angry. But then something else washed over me. It was a strange, cold clarity. I realized that table wasn't a gift. It was a plea. It was my last desperate attempt to beg for an approval that they were never, ever going to give. And as I watched a car swerve around my beautiful table, left on the street like garbage, the last bit of that desperate hope died. And in its place, something new was born. We're all taught that blood is thicker than water. It's a line used to demand loyalty, to excuse abuse. But they never tell you what to do when that blood is toxic. That night, I learned that being disowned is only a threat if you still want to be owned. For me, it wasn't a rejection. It was a liberation. I was finally completely free. I started the car and I drove away. I was finally going to build my own life from my own blueprint. For years. That's how long it had been since I drove away from that house. Since I watched my table get hauled to the curb. For years of silence. In that time, I didn't just build a life. I built an empire. My garage workshop was gone. In its place was Artisan Grain Studio, a 5,000 square foot workshop and showroom in a revitalized warehouse district. The air was thick with the smell of white oak and coffee. I had a staff of 6. Our pieces were being featured in design magazines I used to just dream about. I was no longer the girl pleading for approval. I was the boss. I was the artist. And I wasn't alone. I had Elias, my fiancé, a man who loved the smell of sawdust on my clothes and thought my calloused hands were beautiful. We were building our own life, our own home, filling it with pieces we designed, we built. I was happy, truly, deeply happy. The ache of my old family had faded, replaced by the warmth of the new one I had built. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I was in the studio sketching out a new chair design when I saw the name flash on the screen, Susan. My heart didn't leap. It didn't ache. It just stopped. For years of silence and now this. I took a breath, wiped the graphite from my hands, and answered, hello. Her voice was just as I remembered, prim, clipped and cold. Jenna, I'm glad I caught you. How are you? No, it's been a long time. Nothing. What do you need, Susan? I asked. I heard her sigh, a sound of profound inconvenience. It's your sister, Rachel. Her law firm had, well, there were massive layoffs. It's a terrible market. I waited. I knew this wasn't a social call. She's been looking for weeks and frankly, it's becoming an embarrassment, Susan continued. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, my voice flat. Yes. Well, your father and I have been discussing it, and we've come up with a solution. A solution? Of course they did. Robert and I agreed, she said, her voice suddenly businesslike, as if she were doing me a favor. You need to give Rachel a job. I almost laughed. A job? Doing what? We're a little overqualified for a receptionist here. Her voice turned sharp. Don't be difficult, Jenna. A real job with her legal mind. She should run the business side. Of course. Handle the clients, the finances. You're obviously not equipped for that. You can just, handle the wood. I was silent. The audacity of it, the sheer breathtaking arrogance. After 4 years, after disowning me, after throwing my masterpiece in the trash, they were calling to demand I hand over control of my company to the golden child so I could be the blue-collar laborer they always said I was. Jenna, did you hear me? Susan's voice snapped, impatient. This is the perfect arrangement. It'll give Rachel her confidence back. I have to go, I said. My voice as cold and hard as polished stone. Wait, we haven't finished. I hung up. I stood there for a long time, the phone in my hand. I thought I would be angry. I thought I would be hurt. I just felt tired. And then for the first time, I felt a small dark seed of pity. Not for Rachel, but for them. That this is all they were. This broken, arrogant, desperate need to control everything, even the daughter they threw away. I put the phone on silent and went back to my designs. I figured that would be the end of it. I had hung up on my mother. I had made my choice. I went back to my life, to Elias, to my work. But a week later, my phone rang again, an unknown number this time. I almost ignored it. But something made me answer. Hello, Jenna. My blood ran cold. It was Rachel. I hadn't heard her voice in 4 years. Not since that awful party. I immediately put my walls up, bracing for the second wave of the attack. Rachel, I said, my voice sharp. Look, if this is about the job my mother called about, the answer is no. I'm not. Jenna, please. Her voice wasn't arrogant. It wasn't demanding. It was broken. She was crying. I could hear her gasping for breath. Please, she sobbed. I had no idea they called you. I swear I would never ever ask that. I'm so embarrassed. I stood there completely stunned. This was not the conversation I had prepared for. The anger I had been holding, ready to deploy, just vanished. What are you talking about? I said, my voice suddenly soft. I didn't know they were going to do that, she cried. I've been staying at a friend's place. I lost my job. Jenna, I lost everything. And when I finally told them, they looked at me just like they looked at you. She took a shaky breath. I'm not a lawyer anymore. And suddenly, I'm not their daughter anymore. I just listened, my mind reeling. You have to understand, she said, her voice desperate. You think you were the only one in a cage, Jenna? Yours was just visible. Mine was gilded. It was the golden child's gilded cage. I was the one who had to be perfect, she said, the words tumbling out. I was their performing pony. I had to get the perfect grades. I had to win the debate trophies. I had to get into the Ivy League law school. I had to get the 6-figure signing bonus. Also they could feel successful. Also they could brag to their friends at the country club. Rachel. I hated it. I hated law school. I hated every 60-hour week at that soul-crushing firm. But it was the only way I could get them to look at me with love, with that pride. Her voice cracked. And the second it was gone, the second I failed, the love vanished. Just like that, I wasn't their daughter. Jenna, I was their status symbol. And the moment I lost my status, I was just as disposable as your table on the curb. I sank into my office chair. All the jealousy, all the resentment I had felt for my perfect sister my entire life, it was all a lie. She wasn't my rival. She was just the other victim. Rachel, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Where are you? We talked for a long time. For the first time, really, not as the scapegoat and the golden child, but just as sisters. She told me she was done with law. She was terrified, but she was thinking of going back to school for landscape architecture, something she'd secretly loved her whole life. And I found myself proud of her. But there was one thing that was still eating at me. A piece that didn't fit. Rachel, I said, my voice quiet. I'm so glad you called me, but I have to ask. How did you know I'd be okay back then? I mean, after the party, I almost gave up on woodworking entirely. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear her take a shaky breath. You almost did, she whispered. You were so beaten down. Jenna, I was terrified you'd just let them win. That you'd just get that real job Dad was always screaming about. So what happened? I asked, confused. What changed my studio? It only happened because I got that one massive commission. The one that put me on the map. I remember, she said. It was crazy. Right when I was at my lowest, this anonymous order came through. A brand new law firm downtown. They wanted their entire office suite done. Desks, conference table, bookshelves, everything. It was the commission that let me rent the studio. It was the money that let me hire my first helper. It was everything. Rachel, it was the start of everything. I was smiling, just thinking about it. That unbelievable stroke of luck. Who was it? I tried to find out for years to thank them, but the order was placed through a holding company or something. The line was silent. Rachel. Her voice was thick with emotion when she finally spoke. It was a new law firm. Jenna, my law firm. I froze. The phone felt suddenly heavy in my hand. What? What are you saying? Do you remember that six-figure signing bonus? She said, her voice cracking. The one they threw that huge party for. My mind was racing, connecting the dots. The timing, the anonymity, the law firm. Rachel, no. I used every last cent of it, Jenna, she confessed, the tears flowing freely now. I knew I was a fraud. I knew I was just the one who obeyed. But I knew you were the one who was talented. I knew you were the artist. I couldn't let them break you. I couldn't let them win. I couldn't speak. I just sat there in the beautiful office she had paid for, surrounded by the successful business she had secretly founded. All those years, I had seen her as the rival, the one who had everything. And in reality, she was my secret patron, my anonymous benefactor, my sister. After my call with Rachel, I finally understood. The anger I'd held onto for my parents just dissolved. It was replaced by a kind of cold, quiet pity. They weren't monsters. They were just empty. So when my mother, Susan, called me back a few days later, her voice sharp and demanding, well, have you spoken to Robert? We expect you to do the right thing for your sister. I didn't feel anger. I just felt done. Hello, Susan, I said, my voice calm. Jenna, stop this foolishness. Your father is very upset. You will give Rachel the job. Is that clear? She'll start on Monday. I took a deep breath and looked out my office window at the bustling studio, at the life I had built, the life Rachel had helped me build. No, I said. The silence on the line was heavy. What? What did you say? I said no. I won't be giving Rachel a job, and I won't be helping you. I paused and then I said the words I needed to say. But I've spoken to Rachel and I will be helping her. As her sister. We're figuring out her next steps for landscape architecture school. I heard a sharp intake of breath. You what? Landscape? That's just gardening. She's a lawyer. You've poisoned her. You ungrateful. Goodbye, Susan, I said, and I hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. I learned through Rachel what happened next. After she told them she was leaving the law for good to study design, they did the only thing they knew how to do. They disowned her too. They told everyone at the country club, anyone who would listen, what terrible, ungrateful daughters they had, one a glorified carpenter, and the other a disgraced lawyer who now plays in the dirt. They're alone now, Robert and Susan, in that big quiet house with their perfect furniture and their paid-for club memberships. Their pedestals are both empty. The Artisan Grain studio is busier than ever. This morning the air smells like fresh-cut maple and espresso. My fiancé Elias just dropped by to bring me my favorite coffee. I'm at my main drafting table, sketching out a new blueprint, a complex, beautiful chair design. I'm so focused I don't hear the door open. You're going to burn yourself out, you know. I look up. It's Rachel. She's holding 2 coffees and under her arm is a huge roll of blueprints. She looks happy. Her hair is in a messy bun and there's a smudge of charcoal on her cheek. She's glowing. She spreads her own designs out on a slab of reclaimed white oak I've been saving. They're beautiful hand-drawn plans for an outdoor showroom integrated with a green space. Got a minute? She asks, a grin on her face. I have an idea for the new courtyard space. If we use native grasses, we can create a sustainable. I smile and I grab my own pencil. We get to work. 2 sisters finally building something together. It took me 30 years to learn that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you build. And it's worth building right, with the strongest materials. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about building a life on your own terms. Now, I want to hear from you. Who is your chosen family?